It was sloppy and it looked a little rough at times, but I came away very satisfied with the play of these two units in SMU's opening game win over East Texas A&M.
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? We had a game. We actually had a game. Welcome into Locked On SMU, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the game. And let's tell you right now that this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Coming up on the show today, this was pretty rough. They got to correct the penalties. SMU's got to correct the penalties. We'll talk about that coming up. Plus, we will look ahead for the first time to Baylor on next Saturday, an 11 a.m. kick. So we'll talk about that to round out the show. But you know what? Let's go ahead and start with this. I'm Grayson Singleton. You can follow me right there. It just popped up on the screen. Gray_Singleton2 on Twitter. Let's go ahead and start with this. It looks rough. There were a lot of sloppiness going on. There were a lot of penalties. We'll talk about all of that in the next segment. But I told you on last Monday, a week ago today, that when you're playing inferior teams, what is the one thing that has to happen for me to feel good about you going forward? You have to dominate in the trenches. You have to move people in the trenches. The things that separate the Power 4 teams from the Group of 5, from the FCS, isn't always the skill position players, even though that has a lot to do with it. But it is ultimately those dudes on the line of scrimmage that are going to differentiate between the classes of college football. And if I can take away one thing from this SMU game against East Texas A&M, is that I was very, very pleased with the big dudes up front. Now, on the offensive line, it was not perfect. Pass protection, a little bit suspect at times. But the run game? Let's talk about the run game for a second. Every single time SMU ran the football, every time, the line of scrimmage was being reestablished 3-4 yards down the field. Did y'all see that? Did y'all see that? It wasn't perfect, but they were moving people, especially on that left side, I believe is what it was. The left side, but also the cutback lanes were there. The interior three of the offensive line were moving people. I saw guys from East Texas A&M going backwards. So when you're a far superior team like SMU is, that is a non-negotiable. You have to move people. And the numbers back it up, by the way. If you take the quarterbacks out of it, SMU ran the ball 26 times for 126 yards. I did the math. That's about 5 yards a carry. It's a tick below 5 yards a carry. If you round up, it's 5. Satisfactory. I liked how it looked. And you can talk about how the run game, let's talk about that. The extension of the run game. Chris Johnson Jr., 6 carries, 44 yards, had a burst. Just like I told you, I thought he had some serious explosiveness, but his burst was on display. Also got to give major props to TJ Harden. I may have undersold him. I may have been sleeping on TJ Harden. I thought TJ Harden, I thought he looked good. He had more burst than I think I gave him credit for. Him running through tacklers and banging and bouncing off of people, I thought was fantastic. So between those two, that opened my eyes. I'm like, okay, you've got something in this run game here with them. Derek McFall was fine. I think he carried the ball on the couple of times where the offensive line didn't move people as much, and or they ran right into a run blitz. So there's a little bit of that. But I thought Johnson and Harden were the top two. But back to the offensive line. When you're opening up holes for 4.9 yards per carry, you get a stamp of approval, especially in the way they were doing it and how dominant it looked. It looked dominant just from the naked eye. And I like to talk a lot from the naked eye. I don't give out too many stats. I don't rely too much on numbers. Just from the naked eye, those dudes were moving people. Flipping over to the defensive side, they were not moved. I liked what the defensive line looked like. The run game, they did not move. The final number is going to tell a completely different story. The final number is going to say that SMU, if you take out the quarterbacks, gave up 4.3 yards per rush. But in that first half, the first 2+ quarters, kind of, East Texas A&M wasn't going nowhere except for 1 or 2 explosive bursts. Other than that, if you talk about consistently how the game flowed, the defensive line didn't move one bit. And I'll tell you one player that stood out to me, and they mentioned him on the broadcast once, I think. Terry Webb. They got a player in him, man. If Terry Webb stays healthy, that is a clog in the middle of the defense. And they're going to need him. They're going to need him to step up with Alex Kilgore having gotten injured. And we'll see, how long his absence goes. But Terry Webb, dog. I mean, he is just immovable, but can also move himself, agile, athletic, can rush the passer. He had a sack. And then can flow left to right in the run and make plays. I'm really interested to see, and I'm recording this podcast in the middle of the Notre Dame Miami game, and Miami's offensive line looks really good. But I'm interested to see when he goes up against Miami, when he goes up against Clemson, how they attack him. And I'm also interested to see how he stands up against those O-lines, because I'll tell you what, Miami's looks really good. Miami's offensive line looks physical, and they look like they're ready to attack downhill. I'm recording this around halftime of the Notre Dame Miami game. But Terry Webb, man, he stood out. But the rest of the defensive line, too, A, didn't move, and B, they look flexible. They look flexible, and they look athletic. Talk about the interception that was returned for a touchdown by Kilgore. What set that up? Cam Robinson getting his hand up there on a screen pass, by the way. You know how much athleticism that takes? So when I look at the sum total of what the lines did, what the offensive line did, moving guys backwards, no, the pass protection was not great. The tackles, that was a little bit of a problem. Savion Byrd, yikes. Okay, Savion Byrd was not good. He didn't play great on Saturday night. But in terms of doing what you need to do to establish that, hey, we are the dominant team, they took care of that on the offensive line. And on the defensive line, they were sturdy, didn't move, and created some busted plays. For the first game, I will say that's pretty good. I would say that's pretty good. And here's the thing, lastly, in this segment, and we'll get on to what wasn't as good. When you're playing a far inferior opponent, what you want to see is, did we win this game for reasons other than our name is just better than you? I went to the Oklahoma-Illinois State game. That game looked like Oklahoma just won that game kind of because they were Oklahoma and they were playing Illinois State. That's kind of what it felt like to everybody who was in that stadium. I didn't feel that with SMU. I felt there was energy in the building. I felt that the Mustangs actually came out and played better. I mean, you talk about starting the game with the bomb over the top to Romello Brinson. I thought SMU said, hey, no, we are the decided better team. Now, because you're playing that much of a worse team, do you get away with some of the head scratchers that they do? Obviously. But it's week one. We'll talk about that in a second. But it's week one. They'll be okay. They came out and actually dominated and put that team to bed. So for game one, those are the positive takeaways. I like what I saw, especially at the line of scrimmage for both sides, offensive line and defensive line. Coming up next, it didn't come without some sloppiness. We'll talk about that on the other side. Keep it here, Locked On SMU, on a Monday. Quick question for all of you college football fans out there. If you could go back in time and sit front row at your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yes, I said, which hat would you be wearing? For me, it would be the game. These aren't just hats. They're the same vintage styles fans wore back in the 80s and 90s. And guess what? They still go for the same price they did back then. When you use code LOCKEDON, you will get your vintage hat for $16.99. Head to thegamecaps.com. That's thegamecaps.com. Grab your team's classic bar or retro circle design and use code LOCKEDON for an exclusive discount, because legends wear the game. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. This weekend was awesome in college football, by the way. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands. Well, I guess the rivalries if you're TCU and not TCU and SMU, I guess. There's just nothing like it. Let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices just jumping at checkout. We hate it. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is going to be what you paid. Honestly, guys, it's faster, cheaper, and it's less stressful than any other way I've ever gotten tickets in my life. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets this season with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Hey, real quickly, before we get back to the show, we have an important request for all of you. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make our favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like and what you don't, so answer questions about our advertising as well. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for helping us out. Back here on Locked On SMU on a Monday, I'm Grayson Singleton. All right, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. It wasn't all good. It was not all good for SMU in that first game. Now, I will say this, and I'm going to expound upon this more in just a second. It is week one of a sport with no preseason. So there are going to be some head scratchers. There's going to be some mistakes, whatnot. SMU turned the ball over 3 times. Not pretty. But the penalties, especially in the first half, is what stood out. And by the way, it was comical seeing how Wes Durham and I can't remember the coach's name who was calling it with him, how beside themselves they got at some of SMU's penalties. But whether it was Savion Byrd holding or the hold on the punt return that negated a touchdown, there was a roughing the passer. It looked bad in the first half. And under normal circumstances, I would say, okay, fine. Not that big of a deal, week one. And I still think that to some degree. However, the backdrop of this does matter. SMU was the most penalized team in the FBS last year. That cannot be underscored. But when you couple that with the mindset that Rhett Lashley coaches with and how Rhett Lashley wants this team to play, he wants this team to be hyper aggressive. They want to play with their heads on fire. They want to go knock people around and knock them out. And that's all fine and good. They want to be aggressive. But if you're doing that and getting yourself penalized, we have an issue, right? Because Clemson is a buttoned up team that's, not going to be heavily penalized. Miami, so far in this game against Notre Dame, not a whole lot of penalties, and Miami looks pretty good. So when you're playing a tougher schedule, because keep in mind, they were the most penalized team in the FBS last year against not one of the greatest schedules on planet Earth. We all know what the schedule looked like last year. It's going to be completely different this go-round. You're going to have to be more buttoned up than you were. Now, what else looked kind of wonky? Some of Kevin Jennings' dropbacks looked weird. The pass protection was just way off. I don't know if it could have been worse if you adjust for the team they were playing against. They didn't pick up a couple blitzes. They didn't communicate and pass off a couple of games on the interior, a couple of stunts they didn't really pick up on. There were things in the pass pro that was a little bit concerning. I will say this. So that didn't look great, and that's something that's going to be ironed out in time, you would hope. But that left tackle spot with Savion Byrd, oh boy, I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work going forward. I think that's a point of concern, in my opinion, at this point. Corner outside of Deuce Harmon didn't look fantastic. Speedy Nettles was cool. Like, he was good. Don't get me wrong. He was fine, but it wasn't great. So we still need to figure that out. And then also, I think they got caught on a couple drags, which leads me to believe maybe we're still going to see that battle at that nickel spot between Lamadrick Spencer and Jaden Milner-Jones, Kyron Chambers. We're going to have to figure that out as well. So while I just told you the really good, and by the way, there was more really good than what I just hammered home with. I thought the wide receivers looked great. We'll talk more about the injuries in Tuesday's edition. So stick around tomorrow. We'll talk about Jordan Hudson. We'll talk about Alex Kilgore and all of that. But I thought the wide receivers looked great. I thought the wide receivers, for the most part, ran good routes. Not a whole lot of drops. I thought RJ Maryland came back and looked pretty good. I thought he looked pretty good. But as it pertains to week one, going back, I tried to throw a little bit of positivity in there. But going back to the crux of this segment. Week one around college football was interesting. And if you look at the scores and look at the teams, I'm going to limit this to the teams that played far inferior opponents. Okay. Boise State got whacked by South Florida. I guess we kind of know how Boise State is going to be this year with no Ashton Genty. Georgia took care of Marshall as they should. So did Oregon over Montana State. But you look at what Oklahoma did. They didn't look the greatest against Illinois State. Michigan only beat New Mexico by 17, even though New Mexico's a fine team, I guess. K-State only won by 3 over North Dakota. They were coming back from Ireland. And A&M beat UTSA 42-24. So that's under 20 points. Number 20, Indiana, only beat Old Dominion by 13 points. Here is my point. The point in saying that all of this is that week ones are rocky. They are going to be unpredictable. There are going to be head scratchers everywhere. There's going to be guys trying to get their feet wet and get their feet underneath them. Some things are going to happen. KJ missed some throws. The offensive line had some blunders in pass pro. In the first half, SMU could not stop committing just wild penalties. And flagrant ones at that, too. Hell, Romello Brinson's front flipping into the end zone, which, by the way, how stupid is that rule? But things can get a little loose in game one, especially with a team that plays with its hair on fire and plays as aggressive as Rhett Lashley wants SMU to play. They cannot duplicate the being penalized from last year. They can't. And that was probably the sore spot from Saturday night. But that'll iron itself out. Week one in college football is strange, it's rocky, and especially when you've got to generate your own energy and your own adrenaline when you're playing against a far inferior team. Because you really just don't know. You're not even in the flow of how you're going to call the game because you're being pretty vanilla both offensively and defensively, even though I don't think SMU was one of the more vanilla teams that played far inferior opponents this week. So all that said, yes, it looked bad with the penalties in the first half. There were holds, there was a roughing the passer, yada, yada, yada. We get all that. We watched the game. But it is still week one. And week one in football with no preseason is going to be rocky. It is going to be a little haphazard, but you still walked out of there with a 42-13 win in a game in which you were ahead 28-3 at the end of 3 quarters. I'm cool. SMU gave me enough, especially on the interior of the line of scrimmage on both sides, to be like, all right, this team is going to be good. This is a team that can stand up with Miami and stand up with Clemson. the top two teams ranked in the ACC right now. That game last night did not back me off of that. And at this point, that's kind of what you want. Dominate where you need to dominate. Take care of your business otherwise. You're going to have something that's a little bit funky, and you can figure it out from there. And Coach Lashley knows, he said it after the game, they cannot duplicate penalty-wise what they did in 2024. I'm just fine with what we saw from SMU, even though there was a little bit of sloppiness involved. Coming up next, let's take our first look at the Baylor game. That's upcoming on Saturday because SMU is going to have one really, really critical advantage over the Bears. We'll talk about it when we come back on Locked On SMU. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and can kick in ultra fast, probably within 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours as well, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. So head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet, RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. All right, one more segment here on a Monday, closing up Locked On SMU. After a 42-13 win over East Texas A&M to get the season started. So hopefully, because it was the most high-profile game of the night, y'all all got to tune in to Auburn and Baylor. And I watched it. I had a lot of people that I was around living in Norman, Oklahoma, watching that game because Jackson Arnold, former OU quarterback, now the quarterback of Auburn, who looked pretty good. And speaking of Jackson Arnold, he may have given us the one reason why SMU is going to have a pretty immense advantage over Baylor. Auburn rushing the ball. They made a concerted effort to run the football. 51 carries. They ran the ball 51 times, only threw it 17 times, by the way. 51 carries for 308 yards and 4 touchdowns. Baylor could not stop the run to save their life. By the way, Baylor running the ball. You want to know this one? Including the quarterback, which Sawyer Robinson was getting chased all over the place. Auburn sacked him 4 times. But Baylor running the ball, let's take Sawyer Robertson out of it. 20 carries for 45 yards is what they had. That's, I think, what I'm looking. Nope. 20 carries for 83 yards. So just over 4 yards per carry. So Baylor ran the ball okay, but they were horrid stopping it. And that's where SMU is going to have their biggest advantage. Period, point blank in the story. SMU is going to be able to get the ground game going. And look, the offensive line is going to have to play even better than it did against East Texas A&M. But that's why I started the show pointing out that that offensive line was moving people. Because if they didn't, I wouldn't be as confident in them going up against the remainder of their schedule, taking Missouri State out of it. But that offensive line was driving people back. So who's to say that they can't do some semblance of it, maybe even match it against Baylor, against a Baylor team who looked completely outclassed at the line of scrimmage on Friday night. I mean, outclassed might be an understatement. They gave up 6 yards per carry. And with what we saw in the running game with the running backs, Chris Johnson Jr. averaging 7.3 yards a carry. TJ Harden averaging 5.3 yards per carry. I want to know how many of TJ Harden's yards came after contact, too, because he is a problem in terms of getting him to the ground. And then you'll add in the quarterback run game, which obviously they probably didn't want to do a whole lot of. Kevin Jennings made something out of nothing on one drop back where the play broke down and the rush was coming and there was nobody open. And then he got down and didn't take a hit, which kudos to him for that. But all of that with the two running backs that looked really good, the quarterback who is very mobile. Baylor struggled with a mobile quarterback. Now, I will say it's going to look a lot different because SMU is not going to be running quarterback power like Auburn did with Jackson Arnold. Jackson Arnold's just a bigger body and can take that. Kevin Jennings, not so much. But if they can get the run game going, and then you can do the play action and unleash those wide receivers, and you can be two-dimensional the entire game, I think SMU wins this game by double figures. That's my early prognostication of this upcoming game that is still 5 days away. Because if they can stay balanced, already, I'll tell you this. Did you notice in the East Texas A&M game, Romello Brinson got behind the defense. Jalen Cooper, which, by the way, hell of a game for Jalen Cooper. They're going to need him. They're going to need him because Jordan Hudson is not coming back until conference play starts. I'm very confident saying that. If he makes it back for TCU, you have beat the timeline for what kind of injury that looked like. But Cooper got behind the defense. I thought R.J. Maryland going across the middle of the field. They're not going to be able to stack the box. Baylor's not going to be able to put 8 guys in the box. They're going to have to back up. Otherwise, SMU is going to torch them over the top. So you're going to have a lighter box, maybe not the lightest box. You're going to have a lighter box. You're going to have 2 tight ends. I guess one is now a wide receiver. However you want to term that, by the way. I saw some people debating me in the comments, which, by the way, leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel. But I saw some people telling me in the comments, some people hitting me in my Twitter mentions saying, no, he's just a guy who's going to be in 12 personnel. Yeah, he's listed as a wide receiver on the depth chart, but yes, he has a tight end body. Either way you slice it, he and Matthew Hibner are going to be on the field together a lot, which means one of them is going to be blocking a DB, which makes the box that much lighter. So if you're running against light boxes, you take care of a defensive line that did not stand up one bit to Auburn on Friday night. And then off of that, you've got the RPO game, the quick hitters, the play action, and then eventually you're going to take the top off the defense. I think SMU is set up pretty well in this Baylor game. Also, by the way, if you flip it over to the other side of the ball we were talking about, and we'll close with this. Baylor's pass pro wasn't great either. Sawyer Robertson was running around a decent amount against Auburn. And I already told you that the SMU defensive line looked good. Who's to say they can't tee off on Sawyer Robertson a little bit? Because this is not a team, I will tell you this. I'm going to go back to the box score here. Baylor did not run the ball a whole heck of a lot. They ran the ball 20 times. Sawyer Robertson threw the ball 48 times. If Sawyer Robertson even approaches that number, by the way, he completed 27 of those passes, so he wasn't the most efficient. But if Sawyer Robertson approaches that number, I feel really good about how SMU's defense is going to handle business, even possibly without Alex Kilgore. And speaking of Alex Kilgore, we'll talk about the injuries tomorrow. That'll do it for Locked On SMU here on a Monday. We're finally talking football, everybody. So it's great to have football back. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. But for your second listen, how about this? A momentous day for Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation along with two-time AP Coach of the Year, Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. A college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, and it's only on Fire TV. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. SMU wins over East Texas A&M. We'll continue the conversation then. Take it easy, everybody.